at the emotional intelligence of the Prophet ﷺ, right? How can we embody that in whatever capacity we can, and how much more can we grow from that? And that's why, I keep going back to that word of introspection, is because we can keep circling around in a lot of these topics and these themes. And I'm not saying that it's not important, because we should know and we should discuss and we should, intellectually and in our heart and spiritually really connect. But then take it back with us and really try to see, how can I embody this? And if we're feeling hurt in that situation, even though we're working on ourselves and we're feeling hurt, what is it that maybe we haven't, like, what is it that Allah's saying, like, hey, grow, learn, what do we need from this? Or maybe I'm not in a safe situation. Maybe I need to leave this unhealthy situation. Or maybe I've, kept to myself for too long, and maybe I need to seek out help. Or maybe the help I've been seeking isn't the best help. We have those people who egg us on, let's be honest, right? We know who we want to call to tell us that we look good in whatever outfit. Right? You know who that person is. Then you know the person who you're like, okay, I'm ready for the truth. Let me go talk to that person. Okay. I'm very well aware of who I need to go to, right? When I need to know the harsh reality and the truth. And sometimes we just need to be ready and prepared to get to that point. And to creating that balance in any relationship, what did we need to know? We need to know ourselves. We cannot go and create a new relationship, or even grow in a relationship if we don't know what we want to, if we don't know our values. So you know your values and how you want to live by those values, right? Two things. You know your values, right? I want to live in the path of the Sunnah, right? I want to try to embody Rasulullah's, actions and practices. Okay, what are you going to do? How are you going to do it? What classes do you need to take? What do you need to study? What do you need to change? Like, what are the actions you need to take, right? It shouldn't just be all something intellectual. It should be an action. And remembering that Allah will not change you if you do not know yourself and want to change yourself, right? We know that. We actually have to be real with ourselves. So what happens is when things aren't working well, a lot of the times it's kind of everything what everyone shared earlier, was that it's our own stuff that's kind of coming up into these relationships. The relative who said something on Eid or Thanksgiving, right, that you can't let go of. They just said something and you can't let it go. True, that person was in the wrong. We can say that, right? They were in the wrong, but what is it that was coming up for me? And then to stop and say, wow, this isn't the first time I've had this reaction to something someone said, or maybe this is not the first time I'm feeling this strong feeling. Wow. There was a time before that. There was a time before that. There was a time before that. There was some time in our lives that we first had this emotional reaction, that our body experienced it. And what happened is that it just, anytime we never dealt with it, a lot of the times it's when we're children. So, we don't have the tools, but we never dealt with it. And so it just kind of became almost like a tool for us to use. And this kind of your body knows. And so it just kind of keeps having that reaction until we're like, wait a second, I don't want this anymore. I don't want this sadness. I don't want this hurt. So it comes from a deeper place. And it comes from a place that sometimes maybe wasn't acknowledged. And so when we take that time to reflect, we'll see that, oh, maybe I need to seek guidance and help from somewhere else, right? That humility that don't have to do it on your own. Go to your teacher, your scholar, a therapist, all people who are not well knowledge in this and that can help me reflect on this. So really the key to a good relationship is to what? Pay attention. Pay attention to yourself. Pay attention to other people around you who are part of the relationship you're looking at. What is coming up for you? And we talked about this earlier, you know, do you get offended easily? I mean, is this something you're realizing that every time I go out, man, I don't like being around people. You know? Do you have that reaction? Or, oh, you know, I feel really like down or sad or something's missing. So these can all be indicators to, I forget, Sister Malika, I think you had asked the question earlier, like, you know, what is, when you have these reactions, when you start feeling these things, reflecting back on like, okay, what's going on? Was it the situation? Or does it happen so often? Like, okay, what is it that's triggering me? And going back to maybe this is something inside of me that has not been acknowledged. Now, I'm not saying, again, that the other person is not at fault, possibly, or that there's, what I am saying is that that person is coming from a place of possibly needing healing, and so are you, right? And to really, when you start like getting into harmony with yourself, you'll start seeing things a little more clearly. Unfortunately, it's not cookie cutter. So we have to take that time and slowly just kind of really see what's going on in these situations and making those connections. So jot down just some values, priorities that you're aware of, just for yourself. And then if you can answer that other question, you know, what makes you happy? And how do you know? They're big questions. I'm just throwing them out there. You were able to respond to that happiness question, mashallah. Good for you guys. Because I'll tell you that for me, I can maybe say where I feel happy in my body, right? But to say, how do I know in a situation I'm happy? That can be challenging, right? We can, because it's easier for me to say, I'm not happy with this, or I'm annoyed, I am frustrated, I'm angry, right? I bet we all could have a long list. That journal would be really easy. But to say, like, well, how do I know when I'm content given the situation? Oh, well, I wouldn't feel those things. Okay, great. You wouldn't feel those things. How do you know you're actually happy? It's an interesting one. So I'm going to have you guys hold on to what you wrote, and then you, inshallah, use it in the breakout groups as well. And we're going to kind of, that's a good question. Is content the same thing as being happy? I said content because honestly, because when I've asked people questions about when do you know you're happy, that can sometimes be overwhelming to think about. And so I'm like, okay, when can you say that you're just content and you're like comfortable? So sometimes when I say it in those terms, people are like, okay, that's not so like big. Yeah, like satisfied. Okay, I can handle that. Right. And that in itself can be telling, right? That we're kind of scared to be like, oh, am I happy? Oh, I don't know. Okay, so I want to take this to the other level of understanding what the balance is, right? We talked about balance being harmony, right? In a relationship. And sometimes we need to, and though let's say you are in a harmonious state, what helps that is we talked about knowing our values, being introspective, knowing ourselves, maybe even the other person knowing themselves, but it's also then creating boundaries and healthy boundaries. So boundaries help you define what you are comfortable with and how you would like to be treated by others. That is what we're talking about with boundaries. Again, where did this come from? From knowing our values, from knowing ourselves, right? Think back to the journal prompt. That's why I asked you, what are your values? What are your priorities? So now the boundaries may change in creating how much we let someone in, how much we let someone out, or where we're putting them in the circle. So I'll show you guys a quick drawing because this is easy for me to do. I mean, I think it's nice to have that little visual. So let's say you're in the middle. I'm just going to make you a little star. And then, right, like that. You're in the center. That's you. That's your world. And then it's like, who are you going to let in to that circle. So when you're in a marital relationship, and I do this with couples, guess what? There's another person in here. That's you guys. That's your foundation. Now, the thing is we don't want it so closed and rigid where no one can come in and out. And I've talked about this before in previous sessions, probably. So, it might be a little like, some openings to let people in, right? Like, let's say it's your parents, your siblings. They're not in the circle with you. Your siblings may be here, right? Your parents should be here probably because, they have a haq upon us, right? You have to fulfill the rights. If we're talking about marital relationships, then you have kids. Kids are going to be on the line. They may feel like they're inside, especially when they're infants, but they're on the line also because they come and go. And then as they get older, that may change and they may come a little bit more here, right? Like that. And then you have friends. And some friends are maybe a little more inside here, some are out here. And then you have, like colleagues. Right? Does that kind of make sense? When we're talking about boundaries, so just kind of keep that image in mind. So when you see that solid line, almost thinking like, okay, you're closed off, you're not letting anyone in, right? But what we want is a more porous relationship, like a porous boundary, meaning that sometimes people can come in and out. Again, family, close friends, things like that. We're not so closed off to them. And those people are usually the ones who know your values as well. You're on the same page. They have an idea, or there's something that you guys can relate to. So if you say to yourself, or I don't know, I guess the question is, do you know your boundary? Do you know where you have boundaries in certain aspects of your life? A lot of the times people will think, well, let's see. I don't know. I mean, I have some very strong values. Okay. Like I don't let people maybe treat me a certain way or do certain things, but I don't really know where my boundaries are when it comes to family members, right? Or my parents as an adult. The easiest way I usually tell people is, let's see, how do you know when the boundary has been crossed or it's unbalanced? Think of times when you may feel resentment or angry or sad or shocked. A lot of the times, maybe there's a boundary that's been crossed, right? We teach this to little children. You have your little bubble. If someone even like grabs you or touches you, even if it's a friend, that's your boundary. You have a right to say no, stop, right? Same thing goes sometimes when we're in group settings. If we're not comfortable in a setting or someplace, maybe we've crossed a boundary. This is an example. You go into a restaurant. You have no problem going out to restaurants. You're fine. You love being social. However, now somebody, let's say, has brought shisha to the table, right? And then you're like, oh, I don't really feel comfortable with this, or something comes up inside of you. You already have that awareness. You know your values. And let's say you're saying like, you know what? I just don't feel comfortable with this. Oh, okay. This is something that has crossed a boundary of mine in my core values, right? And then you can make a decision moving forward. Not having to be offended necessarily, but to be like, oh, I wish I had known. You can now clarify with the person and now you can talk about it and you can decide if you want to stay or go. Okay. Is this making sense? This concept of boundaries? Okay. Alhamdulillah. So these boundaries, let's go back to that original list we had talked about earlier. So we create that inner circle. It's maybe you, or if you're coupled, I would suggest that it would be you and the person, your spouse. And then how tightly is the circle around you both? And then how porous that we said. So with your parents, what does it look like as a young adult compared to maybe you as an adult with your own family? That's going to change. So this isn't a fixed boundary necessarily. Your boundary with your children, we talked about, right? How that's going to change. They're going to be inside the circle, and at some point, maybe they'll come out of it, right? They're not going to be co-sleeping with you, at some point. Like maybe they're right next to you, they're in the same room as infants, maybe even till age 3. And then after that, are you going to keep them there till age 6, 8, 15? So you think of it like that. It's always developing, it's always changing. Siblings, are you enmeshed? Where let's say enmeshed meaning, it's a term meaning that you're kind of tangled in like this, right? Enmeshed, where they must know everything that's going on in your life, and you know everything that's going on in their life, and they have a right, or do they have the right to say all their thoughts on what you're doing in your life? Think about those things, like how, or maybe you need to have that boundary needs to become a little more rigid and not so porous. So maybe like a little bit like this, so that they can come and go, but there's a clear stop of like what they have a say in your life, possibly. In-laws, same thing, except that with in-laws, now you have to look at the boundaries of your spouse, right? How much are they letting them in? And right? And what is then, okay, so one, what is your understanding with your spouse about the importance of family, fulfilling rights, and the huck, right? What does that look like? What is that boundary going to look like? So this can be discussed. And then understanding where both of you guys come in with your beliefs of like, how much should they be, any family member should be participating in your relationship, possibly. Now, remember, the trick is to have a boundary, but we don't want it so rigid where we cut off from anybody, right? Because that's not part of our deen, that's not part of our practice. It's not about cutting off. There's a difference. Again, I'm sending a reminder of abuse. We're not talking about that. I'm talking about fairly healthy relationships here. So we don't want to, we don't cut off. This comes up a lot in our society today of like, well, you know what, I need my space, and I don't feel heard, so I'm not gonna, talk to family. I see Sister Rashida, she's nodding her head. Like, we do see that. And so what happens? We have a lot of people who start cutting off from their families. I'm not talking about so much toxicity where it's dangerous for you, but I'm talking about a space where, okay, yeah, I still can fulfill my rights to my mother, to my father, and be respectful, but I don't have to give it all in. I don't need, that's not what that means. That respect does not mean that they can just say and do whatever they want to me. But maybe I can find a way to keep that distance and keep that relationship cordial where we're still fulfilling each other's rights. So that is a nice balance of that boundary, right? You're in control of that gate of who's coming and going. So what stops us from setting these boundaries? It's a lot of limiting beliefs. I know I'm using this kind of jargon, these words, but it's these limiting beliefs. And the limiting beliefs are the things we say in our heart sometimes. We were just talking about this earlier, right? It's the things that we may say, that we go to a family dinner and something is said and you're like, man, I'm just not good enough. I can't do anything right. I shouldn't bother. I don't deserve this. Or Allah's punishing me. I've heard this from people, right? Why would Allah want to punish you? That's not the purpose of our life. So, but people have this thought in their head that they may repeat to themselves, these limiting beliefs. I'm responsible for everyone. I'm not significant. I'm not valued. I'm powerless. I feel stuck. I'm going to be left alone. So these limiting beliefs make it difficult for us to set healthy boundaries, because then now I'm not significant, or I feel like I'm going to be left alone. I may let everybody in, right? I might have that gate wide open and let everybody in because I'm trying to fulfill something by this other means. But if instead we're able to change those thoughts and those patterns and say, like, I am enough, I am significant, Allah loves me, Allah will only give me what's best for me. So then when you think about who you let in and or who you leave out, or how that boundaries are set, again, you are in charge of that gate. I feel like I see people thinking. So remembering that these limiting thoughts are not true. And it's an indicator to what we were talking about before, that something has possibly happened before that created this belief that is not true, right? We keep going, like, this isn't the first time I'm having these thoughts or feelings. So this is that internal work again that I was advising, to really seek some professional help, a scholar, a teacher who's well versed in this kind of work, to process these thoughts and to realize, like, okay, how can I get that control back and change that belief? Because it's not benefiting me or my relationships, right? It's hindering my relationships. I'm not able to see where those clear boundaries are or create them. So by working on that and taking those limiting beliefs out, now I'm able to set healthier boundaries. Like, okay, I love you. I want you in my life. And this is where I'm going to put you kind of in my life. If you look at that diagram again, right? Like, okay, maybe you're not so close to me in my inner circle. Or maybe there were people who were inside your inner circle and you're just like, you know what? I'm going to keep you like right here. I'll have the door open. You can come in and out. I still want a relationship with you, but now it's going to look different. So it's interesting. Like, yeah, there's a shift, right? There's this everyone is going through a developmental stage and change. It's not just, I think the obvious one is children, but when children are going through their developmental stage, right? We talk about infancy to even like preteens, that's a huge shift right there. But as adults, right? Or even elders, right? They're going through a shift because they're having to change with that. And at some point, like especially when we become adults and our parents, and we see them as like, well, they're older, they're wiser, they are, mashallah, they have this wisdom. But you know what? They may have not caught up to the idea that there's been this developmental shift now, right? So they're still, I mean, I don't know. I will admit, like, this is what happens with me and my parents, and the other elders, is that, well, you're still the child. Mind you, I have 3 children of my own at this point. But then it's like, well, we don't know how to create that shift. And so what's changing? The boundaries are changing, right? And so now you can actually open your door a little more and say, like, mom, dad, we can actually have a conversation at the same level where we couldn't have had it when I was younger. Maybe it's not just about telling me what to do, but hey, we can actually share advice with one another and see what's working. So that boundary has shifted. Remember, we don't want to stay rigid. And a lot of the times, our parents also stay rigid because they're like, well, we're the parents. We just tell you what to do and that is our job, you know? Okay. Well, I guess we'll start closing up soon. If anyone has any other thoughts to share, I did want to just close off and take this moment to just share a few thoughts, just takeaways. I mean, mashallah, inshallah, like, I pray that this was beneficial in some way, in form for all of you. But things to remember in a relationship. And as you're processing this, sometimes I think we can get get really deep dive into the introspection and all this stuff and start wondering, like, oh, is it just me? And that's different. That's not what I'm saying to do, right? It's not about, remember, it's not that limiting belief. We're trying to cut out the limiting belief. It is not always your fault. So don't be a punching bag for another person. You have to remember, you do not have to take on everything someone else is dealing with. Each person in a relationship, minus children, are responsible of their own actions, right? We know by 13, 14, you are responsible for your actions. You are not obliged to take on other people's stuff. There's a difference if it is something discussed and that's creating balance and harmony in the relationship. Someone is going through something rough and you are saying, like, hey, you're dealing with depression, you're dealing with anxiety, I'm here for you. And that is something you have decided on and you are okay with, and you guys work on it together. But you're not obliged to just, like, again, be that punching bag. That's not what it's about. You value yourself, you know what you need to learn, relearn, and unlearn, right? With all this stuff. It's all of that stuff. And remember, you are worth love and respect. Okay. That is how Allah created us and what is meant for us. And so if anyone needs, is struggling in any form, remember there are scholars who are well knowledge, who have actually the skills to discuss relationships. There's relationship specialists and therapists out there. So, reach out and seek counsel where it can be helpful, inshallah. Okay. Thank you so much for a fruitful discussion, everyone.